All right, hello again and welcome. Today I am here once again with my co-host Rory, if he would like to introduce himself.
Yep. Hello.
And today we're here to talk about the latest Archon quest, I think the first in quite a while, called Autumn Winds, Scarlet Leaves. And of course, this is starring Beidou and our newest character, Kazuha. And we learn quite a lot about both Inazuma and Visions. So we're going to just go through the quest and give our thoughts on sort of what we learn and what it might hint at for the future of Inazuma. So we'll dive right into it. The quest starts pretty simply. We seem to be starting right after the last quest in the Archon series. We are looking to get passage to the closed nation of Inazuma. And in order to do that, we talk to the one person who we know is from Inazuma, which is one of the characters in Liyue Harbor. And she tells us that she was rescued after escaping by Beidou, who, while she has been in the game for a while, this is actually her first proper appearance. So we go over to her ship, which is docked out near the Stone Forest, and we meet her, and she is with Kazuha.
So you're introduced to Kazuha, and he explains, along with Bilao, that they are doing a tournament of such, where they intend to show off the martial arts fighters from across Liyue.
Those who don't have visions.
Yeah, specifically those without visions, to partake in the challenge, and the reward, which was put forward by Kazuha himself, is a masterless vision, which the long and short of it, it's a vision that was previously owned, however the owner passed, and it's kind of halfway between dormant and dead in a way, and that will become important later. So the traveler goes backwards and forwards with Kazuha and Beidou, saying that she has no real interest in the masterless vision, simply because the main character doesn't need a vision to use the elements.
Yeah, if I can interject here, characters, apparently, unless we have actually told them, seem to believe that we just don't have any abilities because our character does not actually have a vision, despite being able to use multiple elemental powers, which as of now is still not in the game, which I think would be cool because it would make the traveler not garbage.
Yeah, I agree on that one. If you could change on the fly rather than having to go to a statue and poke it, that would give you a whole new level of kind of flexibility.
Anyways.
But yeah, back to the quest. So after a bit of backwards and forwards, with the traveler saying they just want to get to Inazuma and they don't really care about the challenge or the vision, Beidou eventually says, okay, fine, once you finish it, you can choose either going to Inazuma or having the masterless vision. And of course, you guys agree to those terms and you head off to the Stone Forest to sign up for the competition.
I do want to mention, because I know people will bring it up, that Kazuha says specifically that he wants to see if a dead vision can be reawakened. And Ningguang's vision, the way she acquires it, it's described as she came across it on the road and picked it up and it activated. But the way I interpret that is because we're not told specifically that it came from someone who is dead, I just interpreted that as it was placed there, and if she picked it up, she would have been given it. Otherwise, it was just nothing. So I would say that's not the same thing.
Yes, I would also say it's never really explained how the vision appears to the person who has earned it or has been gifted it by the gods.
Based on reading all of them, I think it's kind of just up to the discretion of the gods, however they want to present it.
Yeah, so in her case, I guess they decided to just put it on the road in front of her for her to find.
And if she thought the right thoughts, which was, I can make profits off of this, it activated, and it did. And then she's like, oh, I guess I better keep it then.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, the traveler agrees to participate in the Crux Clash for the reward of passage to Inazuma. So we go to the clash and we meet the competition, who are all jokes. There's a boisterous man who is probably a wimp. There's some dudes getting ripped off in a pyramid scheme. And then there's just some haughty asshole.
Yeah.
Hilariously, we get to beat him up first, and he is a joke. We'll talk a little bit about the competition simply because I think it is noteworthy because we use the Traveler here, and only the Traveler, in their unaligned configuration, nonetheless, where you don't have access to your elemental skill or burst, and you just have to beat them up.
Yeah.
Because wisely, they figured that they probably shouldn't use elemental powers in a competition between people without elemental powers.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see them put the character back to how you first played with them before you walked the 200 odd meters to get to the first elemental statue.
It really was.
It's very interesting to see. It felt like a lot at the time, but it really wasn't that far. But yeah, it's very interesting to see the character reset back to that person with a sword.
Yeah, I think in general, it says to me that they want to put the Traveler sort of back at the forefront of the actual gameplay and story, where pretty much for the most part, almost every quest beforehand technically had them being like the only person, or like them just with like one or two people to back them up. But really, people would just use, the characters that they've built so far. And very rarely, I think they would ever use the Traveler. And that combined with the, whispers that I've been hearing, and I think you've been hearing too, Rory, that they want to feature the Traveler a little bit more in the game, considering they are their protagonist. I think it could mean that we might see the Traveler take a bit more of a front role in both gameplay and story in the coming year.
It was interesting to see that previously in Quest, it's the Traveler appears for cutscenes, and then you immediately switch back to whatever crew you brought along with you. In this one, you're specifically locked to the Traveler for the kind of important parts of the quest.
Yeah, I guess they figured, like, with all the people who are like, oh, you defeated the Osail, the ancient god sealed under Liyue, and it's like, no, actually, Kuching, Diluc, Mona, and Klee defeated Osail.
I was just kind of watching.
Yeah, but we might see the Traveler do a little bit more in the story, which would be quite good.
Yeah, that would be interesting, especially if they make them more useful as a character as along with that.
So after we defeat the asshole dude, Kazuha comes up to us and says that he wants to come talk to us, ostensibly to give us some information about our opponent in the upcoming fight. But as we'll find out pretty quickly, he just wants to. Well, he is the sharpest tool in the shed, and he knows that we have elemental powers.
Yeah, he seems to have an innate ability, I believe he says, to smell or sense things with energies, and he can identify different types of energy, which is because
quite literally he does say it's not just poetic license, because he's a poet. Yeah,
he specifically says that you've been through Mondstadt as well, and unless he shouldn't really know that unless he'd heard tale of your exploits in Mondstadt, and he just simply said he could smell it on you.
Yeah. Well, Newton's laws and all that. Yeah. But he says that we smell of, wind and stone and stars. And we'll talk a little bit about the stars later on. But that's how he was able to figure out where we'd been through, obviously being attuned with both Animo and Geo. Yeah. Kazuha says, and I have the script up here too. So Kazuha asks us to demonstrate our skills, and presumably we would use both of them, but again, game restrictions, and you only have the one. I was locked to just Animo because I was trying to be clever and just use the Traveler, which probably wasn't the smartest idea, but I digress. After that, we talked to him a little bit more about visions, and this is probably where the quest started getting really into the meat of the lore. And as we've been told in bits and pieces, the Raiden Shogun, who controls Inazuma, closed the country down and began what's known as the Vision Hunt, where she is going around to all of the citizens of Inazuma and confiscating their visions, and if they don't give them up, they'll be killed. We ask him, why he's so interested in visions. And he explains to us that he wants to know, why the Raiden Shogun, who is the Archon of Eternity, has suddenly decided to start confiscating visions. And he talks about, if they doubt why, the reasons why people should be given visions, which, is different for each Archon, or if she doubts the act of giving visions themselves. So why don't we break down, I guess, both of those points and sort of the larger idea of visions themselves. We'll start off with why the Archons even grant visions in the first place. And for the most part, it seems to be that they believe that visions should be given to people who do great feats or things that the gods find favorable. You see this in pretty much all of the characters.
Yeah. Anyone with a certain resolve or a certain strength, or anyone with a certain requirement as well in certain cases. It varies quite a bit, and I assume it depends on the whim of the elemental, the Archon of that element giving it out.
So when it comes to the criteria, I think that probably has to do with the fact that the Raiden Shogun is the Archon of Eternity, and I think that it sort of ties into both points, actually. Where I think that the reason that they're confiscating visions is because as these Archons bestow them to mortals, they are in fact giving away portions of their power, presumably permanently. I don't know if that would be like reclaimed upon the death of the wielder. I would assume not, but I think the fact that they are the Archon of Eternity probably is why they decided to start confiscating visions, because she's like, if I keep giving away visions for all of eternity, eventually I'm going to give away all of my power, and then I'll be, immortal at best, or, nothing. I'll disintegrate into the wind. And there's probably some sort of reason in the larger plot why suddenly they decided to become paranoid about it, be it the Fatui or the Abyss or whatnot. But regardless, her perspective on time probably is the reason for it. And I find it interesting thinking...
I was going to say, it would be interesting, and I'm sure we'll learn more about it once we actually arrive in Inazuma, but if that is true, then really she would only be reclaiming Electro visions, since that is her element.
Yes. Yes.
But she is reclaiming all of them, which means she's, if that is the case and it's parts of the other god's power, she is reclaiming power from other gods as well.
That is true, because we've talked about this once or twice in the past, but we seem to have confirmation that the Archons give away visions for their elements specifically, because Kazuha says that Electrovisions specifically have not been granted for a while. Again, he has only been in Inazuma, and we don't know if Electrovisions have not been granted in other places, if Electrovisions refers to Inazuma visions, or if it specifically refers to Electro-Inazuman visions. Again, maybe it's not important. Maybe she's collecting just all visions. I don't know. I think that the closest possible guess is that it is Electrovisions in general. I'm not sure what consequence it would be for collecting parts of the other god's powers. I would assume that would be quite bad.
I would imagine that would cause,
and they would get quite upset about it.
Yes, I would imagine so as well.
And that does cause the second Archon War, which, oh boy, now we're getting into the real speculation.
Yeah, it doesn't, and it all boils back down to how the vision actually works. Is it a gift of power from the god, or is it something of a catalyst almost that allows them to use an element that is already in the world? Because I feel like there's a lot of people with elements. I feel like more than just the ones we see. I'm sure they're all across the world. If the gods were giving away, a piece of their power every time, you'd think they'd be a bit less common, because the gods have limited power.
Actually, I just thought of this. Remember at the very beginning of the game when we first meet Venti, he's like, "Oh, you took sort of some of my power," and then you're like, "Oh, sorry," but you actually took that when you went to the Statue of the Seven. So
you kind of absorbed it from. I think that probably, because you don't have a vision, I feel like you are borrowing. That is essentially what you're doing. It's without making it sound too bad, it's almost like you're leeching off the statue's power.
Yeah, you kind of are. So maybe it's like you really are just like given bits of the god's power, and then you as the traveler, and we'll talk about this again later on, you as the traveler are able to just directly absorb that power, or at least a part of it.
There are so many interesting channels that they could or could not go down here.
Yeah, I feel like I've lost track of the concept you brought up. I should have written these down.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I mean, that's this quest's main point, or one of the main points of this quest, is specifically about visions and
Yeah.
Inazuma. So having a wider discussion on visions and why they might be reclaiming them, specifically in Inazuma, it's within the scope, I'd say.
So, I guess to sum things up, we learn that the Raiden Shogun is collecting visions in Inazuma, and she is not giving out new electrovisions. And that might be because of any number of reasons. But moving on, Kazuha asks us to demonstrate. I think we talked about that. Oh, do you want to talk about the smells?
Yes, specifically the reference to Paimon. I think he said the traveler. You've got the lines up, but I think he said the traveler has a unique smell.
He talks to you and Paimon sort of at the same time.
Yeah, and he specifically says that Paimon has a peculiar smell, including that of the stars. And he also kind of hints at that towards the traveler as well. Now, the traveler makes sense because they hopped between worlds, and that was always shown as a kind of star, like a shooting star kind of graphic.
It's like Kirby.
So that would make sense. Exactly. But Paimon is different. Paimon didn't come with you. And she seems to have been in Teyvat for at least a while since she's acting as your guide. And
more or less, she seems to be a native. We don't have anything to say that she isn't.
But so far, the only one of her kind. I mean, you don't see many other small floating creatures talking to you. And everyone seems while they're not shocked by her existence, they're also not, she's not common.
Yeah, certainly there's weirder things, but she is not like, a boar. We'll just see a Paimon floating in the forest.
So it'll be interesting to see if she, say, fell into Teyvat a long time ago, doing a similar sort of thing, hopping between worlds, or if she is just...
She is definitely... This is something that's been sort of hinted at a few times, in that, like, the stars in Teyvat have some sort of significance. We don't really know enough to say specifically what that would be yet, but she seems to she seems to have some part of the power of the stars.
Yeah.
And, you see that with like the idle animations and, all that sort of good stuff. And you had, Mona's quest. And
of course, every character has their own constellation, which...
the stars seem to be of like, I'm trying to think of the word, like actual importance and not just like metaphorical.
Especially because the city of the gods is called Celestia, I believe.
Yes. Which again, is always like the stars and all that.
Yes, exactly.
And I think we'll learn about this probably in quite a few nations, maybe like in a year or so. But I think that it'll sort of tie into Kanria a little bit, which
I think will be fed.
There's not really anything else to say about that right now, but we're getting more and more obvious hints that Paimon is not just a guide, and that
I think this is the real start of the bread trail that will lead to us finally understanding what...
Maybe we'll be a god. I don't know. But Traveler is special, and Paimon is also special.
Well, there was always that I bring up quite often in these videos, but the animation they do, I think specifically for the battle pass, but it talks about the previous... The gods picked somebody to hold all power.
Oh, I always forget about that. Yeah, because I skip it because it's the same one.
Yeah, the same one over and over. Yeah, but the first one was like corrupted in some way, which could hint at being that god, the unnamed god.
Either the main god or your sibling.
Yeah, and you are kind of shown as the successor of that one who will truly follow the path and ascend. So I always look at that every time they hint at you having some sort of like importance beyond just being able to absorb power.
Also, let's have a shout out to Lumine being in the PlayStation banner now for Genshin.
Yes, I did see that they very much said there's been an imbalance in who's shown as the actual main character of the two siblings, and they want to address that. So it's very good to see that they're actually following through on that.
Oh yeah. So yeah, quite a lot, and I think we'll learn more about stars probably not soon, but in the distant future. So following our little talk with Kazuha, we head back to the arena for the finals, for the final fight. And Beto's there waiting for us, and we get all set up ready to go fight the finalist, and they're missing. And surprise, surprise, they stole the vision, the masterless vision. Who would have guessed?
And specifically, Kazuha, with his nose, as he says, essentially, he just sniffed.
No, he heard it. He heard it getting taken.
when he says heard, I don't think he means the literal sense of he heard the box open and somebody run away. I think he means it in a kind of more,
I don't know, man.
he heard, because he says he can smell and hear elements and stuff. So I think he probably just heard it getting more distance or something. Maybe he hears the sound of the.
Well, he does specifically talk about hearing actual noises, but that's not.
Oh, as well, yeah, but yeah. Anyway.
Anyways, so the vision's stolen. Beto gets really upset, and then we decide to go track it down. And we follow the guy who stole it. It's a treasure hoarder. Just gasp.
Yeah, shock horror.
Kazuha roasts him, which is hilarious.
Yeah, very interesting, that part. I just want to, because that is important to the next part that's coming up. He puts the the treasure hoarder under pressure, a lot of pressure, shall we say, while he's holding the masterless vision.
And then we go beat him up.
Yeah, because it was actually from the talk. It seemed like the treasure hoarder was being talked down, saying, "You've been caught. Just hand it over," like, yada yada. And then Kazuha specifically goes out of his way to sound threatening, so that the treasure hoarder is forced to kind of into a corner of just like, I'm fighting for my life. And why he does that will be explained afterwards, which I found quite interesting.
I just think it's hilarious that he threatened to break his arms and brand his forehead.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But after the savage beatdown that you give, you decide to let him go, and you confiscate the masterless vision back. And then Kazuha explains exactly why he did what he did, and a bit of more backstory, which you've got the script up for, so I'll let you cover that.
Yes, so Kazuha tells us then that he wanted to put the pressure on this poor treasure hoarder to see if the vision would awaken when he was under the stress and under threat of death. And it did not, so I guess nobody really liked him. But we then learn the backstory of this vision and why Kazuha is so attached to it in one of the famously amazing cinematics. We learn that the vision was originally given to Kazuha's friend. When the vision hunt was decreed, his friend decided to take a stand against it, and he wanted to fight to see the divine punishment, which is a sword technique that he wanted to see. So he took a stand against the Raiden Shogun, and as you would guess, he did not win against a god, though presumably he did get to see the divine punishment skill that he wanted all his life. But as he was struck down, Kazuha took his vision as it was flown from the palace grounds. Grasping it, he escaped from the guards, and that took him to where we see him now, as he escaped as a refugee from Inazuma. Not a refugee, but a fugitive from Inazuma, and made his way to Liyue. And he wants to reactivate the vision to keep the memory of his friend alive, which I thought was a good reason for it, although I know you disagree, Rory.
No, I don't disagree with that. I found it quite interesting that he was, it was going to be a peaceful ending, and he forced a fight specifically just to try it. I thought that was a bit.
Yeah.
Even if he was very confident in the Traveler winning, which of course, I mean, you're not going to lose, but it's just without consultation. It's just like, oh, this was going to be peaceful, but I'm going to make you like beat the crap out of this guy.
Well,
so
he wants his friend's memory to live on.
And then you ask yourself the question: would his friend want him to be threatening death on people to do so?
I don't think we'll ever have
a whole philosophical.
I don't think we'll ever have an answer.
We're not going to go that far into it. Yeah,
not important. But yes, we find out
I understand the reason.
We find out that Kazuha, of course, escaped with his friend's vision and is searching for someone to carry on his legacy. I want to see the sword technique now too, when he eventually fights the Shogun, assumedly, which would be pretty cool. The first time we actually fight a proper god who has not been
they won't
jailed
just be really
for 700 years.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about? I know we talked about this off camera, but do you want to talk about like fighting the other characters, like sort of what we talked about there?
Yes, that would.
So to give a little bit of a backstory, during the time when we're talking with Kazuha and he wants to see our skills in action, we both thought that, we would get to fight Kazuha and that would be really cool. But of course we didn't.
An honorable duel against a wandering samurai, as he refers to himself occasionally.
Mm-hmm. But that's sort of is to the point that I think it would be really cool if we could actually fight characters using their abilities. Of course, we fought Child technically, but that was not like
Yes.
normal Child. That was him using his fancy delusion and stuff. I think it would be awesome if more
Specifically,
characters had that sort of like you could fight them in that
introduction.
way.
Yeah.
Where they are the
And not,
characters, maybe they do have more
yeah.
moves though, because like Child's first form is basically just him, and I think that was really
Yeah,
awesome.
but with I mean, although he can do that shoot the ground attack that I wish he could do as an actual character.
Mhm.
Just various things like the whale as well.
Yeah. So I think it would be really cool if we could fight more characters because
Yes,
they
and
have all
we're
these cool
specifically
abilities.
not talking about PvP here. We're
Yeah.
specifically talking about like an almost mini boss battle type thing, or maybe even a full-fledged boss battle, depending on how strong this character is supposed to
You'd
be.
never be able to balance PvP in this game, so
No,
please don't.
no, there's so many. You couldn't.
It would
Unless you
literally
just
just be pay to win. But being able to actually fight AI characters, with
And
the
even
abilities.
if it's not for like, it would be better in a story context where the character has clashing goals against you or whatever.
I mean, even if you
But
just want to like spar.
yeah, I was going to say that's what I was going into. Even if you just want to spar them, because let's face it, there's only so many times they can throw a character in your path that you have to fight before you get a bit bored of like, oh, this person's going to fight me because their goal's slightly different.
Like I've beaten up Killytros for the 800,000th time, and I've slaughtered probably a whole country's worth of treasure hoarders. Like,
yes.
I want to fight a challenge that's not like I've talked about this too, not here but other places. Like I always like the fights between more or less equal characters, like on equal footing, where you're not fighting like some ancient beast or some elemental construct, where it's just like two dudes just like button heads, or not button heads, but just going head to head.
Yeah,
where it's just like skill versus skill.
Yeah, I would like to see more skill-based fighting in it, as opposed to just, oh, okay, so if you bring ice here, you win, and if you don't, you kind of don't, sort of thing. I mean, the elements are a very important part of the game, and I like that about the game. But I would like to see a more kind of interaction with other characters that aren't just unnamed.
Kind of like how Dark Souls is like, you will win the fights if you are skilled enough to learn the attacks and, use them to your advantage to strike. Where it's not just, oh, this enemy has 800 million health. Good luck.
Specifically with the event that's going concurrently with us. 175% health. Fun.
Yeah, but that's our little segue about that.
Yes.
So we eventually head back to the clash, and Beto is gone, summoned by Ningguang to go yell at her because supposedly things got out of hand, although I don't know what exactly could have gotten out of hand. But Beto's gone. Kazuha laughs about it and decides that we're probably the winner, and that he'll tell Beto that we won and that she'll have to take us to Inazuma. And that sort of ends it off with, we have to make preparations, aka the quest's not going to release for a few weeks still. And that is the end of the quest.
Ready.
So
it's very much confirmed that we're going on the ship now, not that anyone was surprised.
Do you want to talk about like where it might be on the map? Because I know you shared that you're nervous that it'll be a separate tab.
I'm hoping that it will be a location on the existing Teyvat map, which would make sense because it is in Teyvat. I mean, they named it Teyvat for a reason. Yeah, exactly. Well, and the world itself is called Teyvat.
Yeah.
Or the whatever you want to refer to that
as opposed to, for context, as opposed to the way that the Golden Apple Archipelago is just a separate tab that you have to teleport to. Yes. And I think that it's probably going to be.
I do as well. That would be it just makes sense. It's part of Teyvat to put it on the Teyvat map, even if you put it a fair way off coast, just so you don't have people.
Yeah. So the reason that, I guess I would say the most likely reason that people would think that it wouldn't be on there is like, oh, you can just go Kaya yourself over. But I think that's pretty easily explained away in that the Raiden Shogun has put up a perpetual typhoon, something like that. Yeah, storm, basically around the whole island. And I think that's a very easy gimme kill wall.
There would be a kill area or a Paimon turnaround area type thing.
Like,
in the
we shouldn't go here. We're going to die. So I think by the end of the Inazuma quest line, that'll be gone. Presumably, we'll have resolved the issue. But I think until then, it'll be off limits unless you
Well,
take the ship via the quest. So I think that
Yeah.
probably, I don't think that's an issue.
and one way or t'other, I assume it will be solved by the end, regardless of how
Mhm.
how the character ends up having to solve it.
Yeah, so we're on set for Inazuma now, presumably in the next update, which I think
Yeah, I
is
mean,
2 or 3 weeks away.
at most they could put one like non-related, non-story quest in beforehand,
But
but
you know
they
what?
couldn't really.
Oh, is Albedo's little sandcastles not good enough for you?
That's what I'm saying. It's some sort of, at most they could put in maybe one side quest types thing that's like it. It's nice and all,
They'll
but not
probably do
actually.
another round of hangouts at most, maybe. I think
Yeah,
that's probably possible.
I'm saying now that they've done this quest here, they really can't afford to put it off too much
Yeah.
because
God, can you
in
imagine
game
how
they're like,
cringy the
okay.
Diluc hangout's gonna be?
Oh god,
That's gonna be not fun. Traveler hangs out with grumpy 30-year-old man.
the Ningguang one.
No,
Imagine the
Diluc.
Ningguang one. No, I know, but I'm saying the Ningguang one will be interesting as well. It's
The
just takes.
the
Yeah, she
traveler
just teaches
like
you about the stock market.
yeah.
That's all she does. Like.
Now I'm thinking of these like It's Always Sunny episodes where it's like the traveler learns stonks.
Literally. Just to go back to something that was said, I think anyone who has escaped Inazuma has been referred to as a refugee rather than a. I can't remember the other term you used.
Fugitive?
Fugitive, yeah. I think they specifically refer to them as refugees, which would suggest that other nations looking at what is happening in Inazuma do not, well, not to say don't like it, but they don't approve. And whether that comes from the governments themselves or the kind of God's view on the whole hunting.
Oh
of
yeah,
vision.
I forgot. We should touch on, because they talked about this, that the nation technically isn't closed. They have
Yes,
facilities for processing foreigners and like trade.
Yes, that's
So that's
and the crux.
I don't know how
That's
they're
the
gonna
reason the
like
crux fleet.
implement that, but
That's why Beto can get you there, because the Crux fleet is allowed into that port specific, or like one specific area.
yeah. So technically,
where
they
can
do process
you.
foreigners through like I
think
forget what it's called, but some place.
Yeah, they require. I think it's. I specifically think that's for. I don't think that's for anyone to visit, and they just have to pass through like a visa checkpoint
Yeah,
or
no,
anything. I think
it's
that's
like
specifically
entering.
for,
It's trying to enter like East Germany and shit in the Cold
I
War.
think it's for like diplomats and the Crux fleet, and but people who have a reason to be there and they accept as a foreigner who has a reason to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But because you could, to take examples of real life Japan, you could still visit real life Japan you just couldn't. They didn't want you to trade there, and they didn't want you to come and live there. But if you showed up on a boat, you weren't immediately kicked out of the country either. You could.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see. I think we're gonna beat up a lot of the guards. It'll be kind of interesting because we've never actually like gone to war with any of the actual central governments.
No, although I mean there was a brief skirmish with a bunch of Millilith back in the day, but that was fairly quickly resolved. But in this one, we will be, even though
we are going to be enemies, like public enemy.
Yeah, exactly. Even though we specifically don't have a vision, so they have nothing to take from us, we will almost certainly be fighting their machines, their constructs, and defending people with visions. I should imagine any character that we meet that we could possibly pull for will be a fugitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not going to give us characters without visions, and because we will essentially be allying with them, that means we're kind of going against the Electro Archon.
Yeah, so that'll be really cool. I think Inazuma is going to be. I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be the best nation yet.
I think it'd certainly be one of the more interesting, because in the other two, apart from a brief misunderstanding,
we're like homies right off the bat. Like everyone likes us.
Yeah. In Mondstadt, it was immediate homies. In Liyue, there was some confusion because we showed up at an inopportune time, but essentially it was solved very quickly. Became homies. This one, I think, right up until the end, we'll almost be living a kind of Robin Hood style life of like dodging the authorities and helping those who are being hunted.
And if not, that'll be very interesting to see how they handle it.
Yeah, see, no matter where they go with it, well, almost no matter where they go with it, it should be very interesting.
I hope that they lock off the main city until like a certain point in the quest, because it would just be silly if it's like, I'm going to go trade with the merchants there, and the guards. I'm going to go.
I'm going to take a selfie outside the palace, and like while they're actively hunting you.
Yeah,
that would be very interesting.
So I think it'll be good, and I can't wait.
I imagine it might have some sort of like elemental shield up, and the gates will be closed or something.
Maybe the palace itself. Yeah, maybe the palace itself.
I feel like something will be there to physically stop you getting in before they want you to.
Mm-hmm.
Because it'll be several quests, I imagine. I imagine it'll be 3 or 4 quests or 5 quests, like the other nation's storyline has been.
Anything else? I think that's pretty much all of it.
Covered pretty much everything we wanted to cover and a few more, so I'm thinking that's good.
Yeah, cool. So, well, until we have some more topics to discuss, stay tuned. And when Inazuma launches, we'll have a heck of a lot more to talk about. So
Certainly
thank
will.
you for listening. Goodbye.
And we'll see you next time.